All right, we're going to take a look back on this day in history, August 29th, 2005. I think of that day, and some of you might say, hey, end of summer, beginning of school. Hey, Labor Day's coming up. For a lot of folks, especially along the Gulf Coast states, the Southeast, you're going to think of this Hurricane Katrina. Now, for some, this might be feel much more like yesterday than 20 years ago. Believe me, I remember this vividly, and I grew up in Georgia, central Georgia. I just want to take a look back from a meteorological standpoint of this. We'll talk a little bit about the social science as well, what we've learned, what happened, and what we can do better, and what we've learned to do better for the future. So, the overview of Katrina. A lot of you might not know or may have forgotten Hurricane Katrina actually had three landfalls. The first came in South Florida, near Miami. The second and third were within hours and in the same area. The Louisiana coastline and then the Louisiana Mississippi border, also the coastline. Brief synopsis, this got to a category 5. Now, it didn't make landfall as that, but it was still a major hurricane when it did make landfall. And of course, we all know what happened, the devastation with the storm surge as high as 27, nearly 28 feet registered, 43 tornadoes, and U.S. fatalities over 1,000. So there were certainly a lot of layers to this storm, and it took a long time for us to process what happened. I think for some, they're still processing what happened, as this is not a storm that we'll forget readily, very similar to famous tornado outbreaks, 2011, the Southeast. You just won't forget that. You won't forget what storm impacted you or what came through your neighborhood. This is the same for the Mississippi and Louisiana coast. Let's take a look from the big picture. August 25th, it makes its first landfall as a Category 1. Weakens, then it reemerges over the Gulf, August 26th and 27th. Now watch what happens from the 27th of August to 28th. It slows. It moves over warm water. It rapidly intensifies. Look at that eye. Look at the eye wall. A very strong thunderstorm, and it encounters a little bit of wind shear before landfall, but damage is done by then. It's a massive storm, upwelling a tremendous amount of water, and it goes on to devastate parts of the Gulf Coast before it weakens before the final days of August. But it had impacts further inland as well. We'll discuss those. All right, start from the top. August 25th, 2025. We have a weak Category 1. 80-mile-an-hour wind, glorified tropical low. Granted, when you talk about a Category 1, that's nothing to shy away from. But what this storm ended up going on to do and become, this seems like kind of not a precursor for it. Again, it made landfall. This is an Eastern time, so Eastern Daylight Time at about 6:30. It's on the Broward, Miami-Dade County line, right near Miami, just north, in fact. Central pressure of 983 millibars. From there, as we mentioned and we saw on the big satellite image, it slowed down. It reemerged from the Florida peninsula and it started to intensify. When we say intensify, it started to regroup. Hurricanes, tropical systems do not do well over land. They're tropical. They feed off of water. That's their fuel source. Getting back over water helped it to restabilize a better overall air mass that it was in, meaning we just didn't really have a lot of wind shear. Hurricanes despise wind shear. When we talk about severe weather, we're talking about the need for wind shear to get storms rotating on the micro scale. When you talk about a hurricane, a tropical system on a synoptic scale, wind shear is not good. These things are large structures that need uniformity with respect to the wind profiles, and it got just that as it moved over open water. In addition, there was also very warm sea surface temperatures below. 80, 82 degrees and higher, you're probably going to maintain, if not strengthen, a hurricane or a tropical system, obviously based on other factors like dry air aloft, as well as a wind profile. Well, Hurricane Katrina at this point on the 28th of August, this is the eve of landfall. There it is, and I remember watching this before I went to bed on the Weather Channel, and I'm seeing this just massive storm Um, it's out in the Gulf, and I'm thinking that's coming. It was frightening to me because of the size of the eye. It was one of the widest eyes I'd ever seen. Um, and it intensified again. 173-mile-an-hour winds, max sustained within that eye wall, and its central pressure down to 902 millibars. A very powerful storm. Now we did encounter some wind shear, and it did weaken. Made its first of two Louisiana/Mississippi landfalls. This is again Eastern time, so 7:10 a.m. That would be 6:10 Central, and 10:45 Eastern would be 9:45 Central. You get the idea. It was the morning of the 29th. 125-mile-an-hour winds. It was Category 3. Its second landfall. Yeah, it weakened very, very little. But all of those little islands, these barrier islands, these parishes in southern Louisiana, they're all very close to sea level. There's not a huge difference between where the sea level is outside of the levees and the height within towns, parishes, the city of New Orleans. So here's a look at Katrina's storm surge. And I drew this map based off of some of NOAA's mapping. And what you'll see is we have a lot of 4 to 8 foot in and around the Louisiana coastline. You might think, now wait a minute, we had a ton of water. You did. But when an area already sits that low with respect to sea level, it does not take much surge to cause a major issue. We had the levees break, near Lake Pontchartrain, and that was kind of the nail, the tipping point, if you will, for this particular system. You have a system that's set to hold water back from infiltrating a major metropolitan area, and it fails. And all of a sudden, that 4, 8, 9, up to 15 feet of storm surge that was just outside of New Orleans, like Pontchartrain, Louisiana coastline, became a major, major deal. That's a lot to begin with, but then you add in the failing of infrastructure, and that's catastrophic. The highest storm surge was actually along the Mississippi Gulf Coast, past Christiane over to Long Beach. Had some of the highest, getting as high as 23, 24, 27 and a half feet. Even over here, Mobile Bay had a bit of a storm surge, nothing too devastating, but we saw a surge all the way over towards Pensacola as well. Again, not to the likes of what we saw here, but this was the big one. If you've ever used a squeegee, or you've seen a bulldozer, bulldozer's moving, right? It's pushing dirt out in front. It's removing it from one area, pushing it up to another. You'll often see this when they're clearing a lot. Well, imagine Hurricane is clearing a lot. It's moving over the Gulf. And while it's moving through open water, it's pushing. The winds associated with this system are upwelling, pushing all of the winds to the north or out ahead of it. I'm going to zoom in and kind of illustrate this. So our strongest storm surge, remember, was over here in the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Okay? You look at what we had here with respect to the wind profile, and we're looking at, honestly, a setup here where all the water displaced to this side, which again, here's the center of the storm. I'll draw this right here. So you have your center of the storm right here. Your biggest storm surge is going to be just to this side because your strongest winds are right here. So imagine you're taking all this water that's out ahead of the hurricane and you're forcing it to go inland, and there's nowhere for it to go but continuously forced on shore. On the flip side, you have an offshore wind on this side. So New Orleans was very close to being almost on the better side of this. Didn't matter. We had that catastrophic failure. But your storm surge is always going to be displaced just to the east, just to the northeast of center, depending on where you're at. East Coast landfall makes it a little bit different. But you get the idea. All that water, as Katrina approached the coast, was pushed inland, and then it had to go somewhere, and it moved on shore. And for folks in Mississippi, they will not forget that either. The difference, rather than settling in a bowl like it did in New Orleans, in Mississippi, while devastating, that water was able to recede because the Mississippi coast is above sea level. Vast majority of New Orleans sits below sea level, so hence the water not going anywhere. So with that in mind, switch over. I'm going to show you here a look at some of the flooding from this. This is a aerial view of New Orleans in the days afterwards. Um, Absolutely devastating. This is file video from our Bill Castle, and you see these interstates just underwater. Every single business, every road, every thoroughfare, water is beneath the Superdome. The roof of that partially gone. Again, wind was a factor as well, but this is what happens when water, storm surge is all pushed inland, and you get something like this. And of course, at this point, very difficult to get rescue in there. As beautiful as the weather is right after, it's going to take some time for folks to get in there. A lot of people who could not evacuate. It was too late by the time we had that cone of uncertainty coming into the New Orleans area. But this is one of those views that won't easily forget when it comes to the aftermath of New Orleans, of Katrina, and this just shows it. Desolate city, no movement, cars stopped on the interstates. Really, kind of an apocalyptic sort of look. But this was real for folks there, and this was a big issue, and not just for New Orleans. I don't want to say that it was just there, but the Gulf Coast too. But this was a significant storm, and one where when you talk about what we learned this. We need better ways more advanced ways, if possible, to warn people. And I think we've learned that over the years. We've gotten better. You see people just looking for a place to go, looking for transportation out of the city, and there just wasn't a whole lot. People did the best they could, but again, there was a lot of humanitarian efforts done in the aftermath. This is a good ways outside the city. You can see downtown off in the distance there. So again, just some stunning video associated with this. But we learned better infrastructure. That's a big one as well, and it's not something I think that we will forget anytime soon. As again, we move forward, things have improved from building codes and keeping up with this stuff. So on we go to the timeline of Alabama impact. Later on the 29th, it weakened to a tropical storm near Meridian, a little north of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Again, we were Alabama on the east side of center. The east side is going to be your more active side. You're to the west of center, to the left. It's not pleasant. It's breezy. It's rainy. But that's it. Once this moves on shore, it's choked. It's got no energy coming in. But there's still enough by the time it reaches central Alabama to be problematic. Here are the peak wind gusts estimated. This is from the National Weather Service in Birmingham. 60 to 80 for a good chunk of the state, east of I-65. That includes Maplesville, Plantersville, West Blockton, Greene, Hale counties, Greensboro, Utah, Wedgeworth, all the way down to Linden, York, where right around 80-mile-an-hour wind gusts were had. But as you see, you get away from center and or the center of this, and it weakens pretty quickly. Down to 30, 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts for Huntsville, Fort Payne, Gadsden, Piedmont, Cullman as well. So that was kind of a look at the wind impact here. Rainfall estimates, big gradient here, 3+ inches, right along the Mississippi-Alabama state line. Again, that tropical air as it moved north. It dumped some pretty heavy rain, but kind of a big decrease once you get into the east of Birmingham. Less than an inch of rain for much of Alabama. Jefferson County and points eastward. There were a couple tornadoes. Tallapoosa County tornado was an F1. It carved a path of about 3.25 miles. The Bullock Montgomery County tornado was an F0, but it was the longest track of the day. It had a path length of 5, almost 6 miles. Calhoun County, that up closer to Piedmont, actually very near Piedmont, had a mile and a half path length as an F1, and the Macon County tornado right at 3 miles on the ground in F0. So tropical tornadoes, tropical twisters don't typically have the longest tracks, if you will, and they're typically not the strongest, but they're another byproduct of tropical systems. So, in all, Hurricane Katrina, this is adjusted to the 2024 Consumer Price Index. So this is not the actual number that it cost back in 2005, rather adjusted to today, but all of them are adjusted to today, and you can see some of the big ones up there. Hurricane Ian, people won't forget that one. Obviously, Helene. You think of how powerful and how damaging Helene was. Take that number and multiply it several times, and that's Katrina, to give you perspective. And a lot of people with recency, or that recently on your mind, and Helene, imagine that, the amount of damage that did, and then see how much Katrina did. So, again, I think something we've learned from this is messaging. That's one of the big things that we do in the broadcast community, is give the best messaging we can without the nonsense. And that's what we try to do. The tropics are very quiet now, and hopefully it stays that way. But Katrina, again, one for the books, and hopefully one that we don't ever have to see again. And so far, this tropical season, relatively quiet. So that's your wrap on Katrina. Again, 20-year anniversary. Hard to believe, but another reminder that we are in the peak, approaching the peak of tropical season. Always good. Stay ready. Stay prepared.